Welcome to the Cashflow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner, and big smile on my face today, you can tell, because I have a very special guest. We have Coach Matthew Mitchell, all-time SEC. I think you've won more women's basketball games than any other SEC coach for the University of Kentucky. And, I'm going to forgive you for that. I'll tell you, this is so exciting. So I often joke around, Coach. I'm pretty sure that I'm the worst basketball player in the history of my school. And the last basketball memory I have was at Vanderbilt University in the second round of the NCAA tournament. They had this guy named Rick Patino coaching, and they had a guy who was decent. His name was Jamal Mashburn. He was okay. But my coach, Rick Majerus, used to say, when I die, they should bury me at Churchill Downs so they can run over me once a year like they always do. And so Kentucky's run over my alma mater a few times, that's for sure.
That's funny, Andy. First of all, if you played for Coach Majerus, you're far from a bad basketball player. You that's like saying you're the worst member of Augusta National Golf Course or something. Well, you are a great player if you played for Coach Majerus. So it's funny.
I think I was his favorite because he would keep me on the bench to keep me safe. If you put me in a game, who knows what may happen injury-wise. So he would keep me right by him.
Oh, that's funny. He was a great coach. My connection to Kentucky was just almost, it seemed like destiny. I grew up in a town called Louisville, Mississippi, that's spelled just like Louisville, Kentucky, where Churchill Downs is. And then my first head basketball coaching job was in high school in Lexington, Mississippi. So I've always told the people up here in Kentucky that I was a Mississippian destined to become a Kentuckian because of that. But when I first started coaching in high school was 1996, 95, 94, 95, and then 95, 96, Coach Patino had that great team that won the national title. And then 97 got beat by Arizona in the final and really had the best team. And then they went on to win in 98 with Coach Tubby Smith. Yep. But I was so impacted by Coach Patino and just how his style of coaching and his style of play. And so I end up here at Kentucky and end up buying the house that he built. And so I live in Coach Patino's Kentucky house, and since he's been up at in Iona and St. John's, I've gotten to know him, and he's just a terrific coach. And but I remember those days, and Coach Majerus, wow, what a great basketball coach he was.
Well, we could defend a little bit. We felt like if we got up on you, we were going to be in pretty good shape. So why? At the Cashflow Academy podcast we invited one of the all-time great coaches here. Well, I don't watch the game much anymore. I'd rather play it than watch it. And the reason I have my sons play it is I think it creates such incredible opportunities for adversity in a simulated way. And, I never found my way in school. I got grades to get eligible, but the most important class I had was basketball because, and I love your book. We're going to talk a little bit about the book you've written. You're a best-selling author, and you've got a book, Ready to Win, How Great Leaders Succeed Through Preparation. And, of course, that's such a big part, that idea of preparation. And if you want to have a good business, for me, I look back at the team and the prep and the toughness and the togetherness, the focus, all those things that we talk about in sports, and they bless your life tremendously. And so the reason I've asked Coach to share a little bit about his book today is because if you decide to be an entrepreneur or an investor, either one, you might think you're on a journey to go out and make money. But I will tell you that that you're really on a journey of what we call personal development, because investing and entrepreneurship will find weaknesses in you. They did in me anyway. Yeah. And they will put them on display for all the world to see. So we're going to talk about dealing with emotions. We're talking about tremendous preparation. And I'm gonna say, there are no guarantees. It's very fitting we're talking today. You can tell I'm a little giddy. I usually wear a business shirt. Today I've got my Harriman basketball shirt on. And tonight is so fitting. Tonight I've got two sons. One is a senior, and they're going to be in the state championship tonight. So it's a pretty big day for us. Wow. And speaking to your book on preparation, then I'm going to just then I'm going to pass you the ball and I'm going to get out of the way and let you go one-on-one to the hoop. My father, he's 88 years old, and my son is probably, third or fourth best on that team, so depending on the day. And, part of being successful is be able to surround yourself with people who are better than you are. Mm. So they double team our two, best players, and that leaves my boy open, and so he gets 17 in the first half and kind of keeps us in it last night in the semi. And he had 3 threes in that, 3 for 3, and my dad said, boy, isn't that nice that he made those threes? And my sweet father, I said, Dad, when Zach was 8 years old, we figured out the math, and we kind of scaled it because you don't want to kill your third grade kid. But I said, your grandson has hit over 1 million makes on his way.
Wow.
1 million makes, not shots, 1 million makes, because that's the way the game is now. You got to hit that three. Oh yeah. To hit 3 shots to try to stay in a game, and we'll see what happens tonight. But the idea behind that little story isn't to say my son's good, because there's a lot of great players. It's to talk about what your book is. The amount of preparation that goes for all those players on all those teams is unimaginable to most people. So with that foundation, tell me a little bit about why you wrote this book and why preparation is part of success. Let's start there.
Well, it's such a great lead-in, because what Zach did with those 1 million makes is he put himself in position to win when the time presented itself. And so there was no guarantees that he was going to make those 3-pointers last night, but he was in position, and I would suggest to you he was powerfully positioned to win because of his preparation, and that's what the book is all about. And what I learned, I loved what you said about the most important class that you had and the most impactful was your basketball. I learned early in my career at Kentucky. When I took over at Kentucky, well, let me back up. I first arrived at Kentucky in 2003 as an assistant coach to Mickey DeMoss. I had the great fortune of Mickey was on staff at the University of Tennessee for the great Pat Summit. I was a high school teacher and coach trying to learn and trying to get better as a coach in the summertime. I'd go to their camp, work the Lady Vol camp, because I coached the boys and the girls in this little small school in Mississippi. And I wanted to do a good job for both of them, so I'd go to a boys camp. And the girls camp that I ended up going to was University of Tennessee. But Mickey DeMoss, her top assistant, saw something in me early on, and so I worked for them for 4 summers. And in the summer of 1999, Mickey said, hey, I think you'd be a great fit for our graduate assistant. Now, Andy, they could have hired 10,000 people to do that job. And probably 100,000 coaches wanted the job, but they hired me, and it changed my life because she saw something in me. So fast forward a few years later, she gets the Kentucky job and hires me as her top assistant. Kentucky was at the absolute bottom. So the opposite of what we were talking about with Coach Patino and the over 100 years of success that Kentucky men's basketball had. Women's basketball was not that at Kentucky. In fact, we were at the absolute bottom of the barrel. You could shoot cannonballs into the stands and not hit anybody. I mean, it was at the absolute bottom. We used to play, so I was a coach at Tennessee and then at Florida, and so when you'd go to Kentucky and you just marked that down as a win. It was a win And you knew no one was going to see it because there was nobody in the stands. And so she got there, and I was there with her for 2 years, and we started to try to build it up to respectability. I left and went for 2 years to Morehead State to get my first head coaching job. And then for 2 years later, they brought me back. Mickey decided she had enough of being a head coach, and she got back in. And she's the only person in the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. She and the top assistant at UConn, they went in as assistant coaches. That's how impactful they were in their roles. They're in the Hall of Fame because of it. So she went back and did that. So now I get to Kentucky, and we are sort of respectable, but there was a long way from respectable to the top. And so I was trying to get the program to what I thought it could be, and I was trying to be a technician and a great recruiter and all these things. And what I found out about 2 years in that I needed to commit to was principle-based thinking, and I needed to become a leader. That's really what I needed to do. And in that course of that discovery for myself, I started trying to produce great leaders instead of basketball players. So the basketball, as you know, is a very temporary time of your life where you're valuable competitively. But once that ends, you definitely need to be a valuable person, and you need to be able to compete, and you need to be able to perform. And so my laboratory was trying to develop these kids into being lifelong leaders of themselves first. They led themselves well, and then they could go and help other people. And so what I learned was an important part of that was honesty, hard work, and discipline. That's my platform. That's called the winning tools. That's how we built every basketball team. That's how we ultimately built 2 successful college basketball programs. And that's how I am out now teaching individuals and businesses and high-performance teams. That's how we're going to solve underperformance for people. You know, there's so many people that are just in the rhythm of life, and they are checking the box, and they're turning in work product, and they're being compliant in life. And what I want to teach people is that you can really unlock your potential with this principle-based thinking. And so part of what we teach is preparation is going to put you in that position to win. And so that's what I break down in the book. I thought this was very, very important for leaders to understand you're not going to win every game. Nobody wins them all. But where you want to be is someone who is sustaining success over time. And one of the real building blocks of that is paying attention and becoming a person, like we write in the book, of constant preparation, where it just is part of you that you're going to pay attention to those details. You're going to get yourself ready to win. You're going to get your team ready to win. And that's what we are delivering in this book.
So one of the things you mentioned twice that I'd like to put my 2 cents in on is you mentioned principle-based thinking. And as an investor, you watch the best ever in investing, Warren Buffett, and he is a principle-based thinker. It is so interesting to me, Coach, when people hear that I invest a little bit and we teach a little bit investing, is they immediately go to, you mentioned you were kind of being a technician, and they'll go to what I call the culture of advice, which is a very lazy culture. They say, Andy, what do you like right now? Tell me what to buy, which basically they want free money.
Yeah.
I don't want to learn anything. I don't want to grow personally. Just give me a fish and just tell me what to buy. That's lazy. And I think what people find, you look at a book like Ready to Win, and that could be as much as a question as a statement. Are you really ready to win? Because, great leaders do succeed through prep, and it's a principle-based idea. When I look at the investing books that have touched my life the most, they're not books on investing, they're books like yours. Because what they do is they change the way you think, and generalized principles are such a gold mine because they don't change. They're the same 1,000 years ago. They'll be the same 1,000 years from now. And if a person learns generalized principles, they translate. So many coaches wind up being recruited by businesses to say, help us develop some leaders. Because the pressure, the pressure in any sport, whether it's curling or badminton or the game of basketball, those pressure situations and the tremendous adversity that it provides so beautifully for young people. I think you can learn those principles very, very well in those hostile environments. So you talked about leadership and you mentioned honesty. Let's start with that. Why aren't people honest anyway? Shouldn't we all be honest? Why is it hard to be honest?
Well, if you this is what, if you walk into a room and you're with a group of investors that want to do the right thing and they're not, up to nefarious actions and bad actors, and you say, hey, is it important to be honest? Everybody's going to raise their hand and say, yeah. Would you rather be honest or dishonest? Would you rather us know you as being honest or dishonest? And so we go deeper with it. And the number one skill I tried to teach my players, and now that I'm trying to teach high performers in the business world, is the number one thing we have to learn first, and where it unlocks tremendous power for us in our personal growth, is learning to be honest with ourselves. Honesty with self is such a gift to acquire, a skill to acquire. When I can start dealing with facts and I can leave feelings behind, and listen, we're emotional beings, we're going to have feelings, but when we can cut through those and get to the facts of what do I need to do in this situation, now that starts to lead us down the road of integrity-filled decision-making. But we must establish that. I created the winning tools, honesty, hard work, and discipline, from what we call the losing tools: complaints, excuses, laziness. So I was in a meeting one time at the University of Florida, and I worked for another Hall of Fame coach down there, Carolyn Peck. And we had a talented team, but we were having a hard time getting wins. And she was the most positive person in the face of adversity that I've ever been around. She just refused to get negative. She just stayed positive. Let's keep looking for what's going on. And somebody in the meeting said, if we can get rid of complaints, excuses, and laziness on our team, we'll have something. And I was like, amen, we'll have something. And I didn't know how I was going to use that, Andy. But years later, when I got a chance to lead my program at Morehead State, I said, we want no complaints, no excuses, no laziness. But I don't want to lead with a negative. So that's where the winning tools were born: honesty, hard work, discipline. And so this is one thing that I coach people: the moment I commit to leaving excuses behind, now that allows me to get honest with myself of really what needs to happen. And so, easier said than done, but that's why it's a tool. That's why we have to work at it. That's why we have to build our life and build our leadership. And that's why I named them tools, because at that point in time, I had no idea I was going to become passionate about leadership, but I just logically knew every year we're going to have to build a team. So I thought it was catchy, and I thought tools, but it's been so valuable for me because we have to engage. We have to apply ourselves to this. But honesty with self, I think, it begins the conversation when we are teaching that. And that's really rooted in this concept that we teach in humility. And so a lot of people think humility means I'm thinking less, I'm thinking, especially where I grew up, my parents were very principled. They're like, you don't ever want to brag on yourself. Don't step into the spotlight. Don't, defer, and don't try to be the first at the table. And, all of these sort of polite suggestions and things that they were trying to help you be polite and be well thought of in society starts to make you think, I need to shrink. No, what we teach is humility needs to be an accurate view of yourself. An accurate view of yourself. And so when we get there, we understand we can be honest with what are our gifts, what are our strengths, where do I need to step into the spotlight and perform. But also it makes us aware, if we're honest, of where we need help. So those two best players last night getting double teamed, they needed Zach to make those 3 points, and he stepped in. He didn't shrink from that moment. He stepped up because he was prepared. But that's having an accurate view of yourself. I think that's the pathway to being honest. And so that's sort of the building block of that concept. We could talk all day about that, but that's what I would share with you is what we're doing, and it's a big part of preparation.
You had a brilliant comment a moment ago that I'd hate I'm sure people caught it, but if there's anyone that didn't, we got to make sure they do. You said that you found your principles of what would work by looking at what didn't work. For example, if you look up arrogance in the dictionary, it's an inflated view of oneself. And so the opposite would be a non-inflated view, an accurate view of humility. That's such a gift. And I would tell people, if you're looking in your life financially, have an honest conversation with yourself and look at what is not working, because it's kind of, well, now I'm going to tell everyone how old I am. We used to develop film from a negative into a positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the blueprint of a failed program is actually a blueprint, the negative, the opposite of a successful formula. So if you're struggling financially, I love your talk about honesty with self. I'll tell a Coach K story because he talks a lot about telling the truth. There's the story LeBron James wasn't looking in the eye. He says, we do two things here. We look each other in the eye. We tell each other the truth. So when I turned 50, my wife, I don't know why she just didn't, lace my food with cyanide if she wants the insurance money. But when I turned 50, she said, I'm going to give you a present. And she surprised me at age 50. And this is, I played basketball in 1993 was my last year, which isn't 30 years ago. It's about 100 pounds ago is what it is. So she gives me a present to Coach K's fantasy camp. So there's all these old men from all walks of life, has-beens like me or whatever. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, I'm running my 50-year-old butt up and down Cameron Indoor.
Oh, God.
And I'm hurting. I am hurting. So I go in, and I was smart. Jose, the trainer there, is fantastic. And I went in with gift cards for all his staff saying, gee, you guys are so nice. Why don't you guys go out to dinner on me? Because I knew I wanted a spot in that ice bath. Yeah. And so I'm in the ice bath or whatever it was. My wife, I come out of the training room. Coach K's waiting for me out there. And it's just the three of us out in the hall. He says, hey, Andy, what do you think of the camp? I said, Coach, it's just great, learning so much from Cherokee Parks. I says, it's so fun because I coach youth basketball and I'm picking up so much. And I says, my playing days are over, but boy, I sure appreciate what I learned for the kids. And I couldn't believe it. He looked me right in the eye, and he was serious. I mean, he's an old man. What does this matter, right? It's not horrible basketball. The basketball's awful. And he looked me right in the eye and said, your playing days are not over. You have a game tomorrow, and your team needs you to step up. And he turned his back on me and walked away. And I was like, I looked at my wife and said, did I just get lit up by Coach K? I mean, I can pass away now. This is incredible, Amazing. And then I thought about what he said, and it's not an inexpensive camp. And I did the math. There were 10 guys on my team, and I did the math on that, and I thought, you know what? That's a 6-figure deal. Mm. And I says, our team didn't invest 6 figures to come here and have me not have that right attitude. The coach was right.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And at 50 years old, I'm I don't know if I dove on the loose ball or if I just fell down. I don't know which it was, Coach, but I'll just tell for the listeners, go out and get a copy of Ready to Win and learn about how great leadership and how leaders succeed through preparation, because I can promise you this. When you're honest with yourself and you say, well, yeah, okay, I'm a victim of some things. That's honest. We're all a victim of something. That's honest. Life's unfair. That's very honest.
Yes.
But you know what? I also have to realize I got some freedom in my life, and I can wake up tomorrow and I can read things. And I can learn things, and I can learn principles to start to build my life. and you're going to have losses in investing. Anyone who does this for an appreciable amount of time is going to lose some money. The idea is to, win more than you lose, and you have a winning team. Talk a little bit about continuous winning. It's one thing to have a couple of nice players come in, you have a magical moment, but to do what you did, to build some consistent, and you mentioned the incredible Pat Summitt, how Tennessee and Coach Gino up north, these guys and these ladies, they attract. What brings that continuous success when you're starting to attract and you get a little leverage there because people want to play for you. They want to be a part of a winner. So talk a little bit about the difference between occasionally winning now and then and consistently winning in what you're doing.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that we offer people, that if you will walk down this path, we're leading you to sustained success. It's so important. And so I'd love to go back to something that you said about principles. They don't change. They are bedrock. They don't change. But they also allow us to have the intellectual flexibility to adjust our methods and to be able to see where we need to make adjustments. And so I think the most important thing that we did to have over a decade of success at Kentucky, my first 2 years we were mediocre, 33 and 32, and our methods were industry standard. I was trying to beat Pat Summitt at her own game. I was trying to get a real traditional team together, and at that time it was a big center and it was a big strong power forward and the best shooting guard and all, how you traditionally built a team. And I was trying to play at that level in a traditional manner, and we were mediocre at best. And so what my principles allowed me to do, honesty, I was able to evaluate, can we win playing this way? And the answer was no. It didn't matter whether that was what was comfortable for me to play, but no. Then how can we win? And so we had a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, and we had some kids that had great desire to win. And so we made the bold decision to scrap traditional basketball. And it's so funny how now you hear all the time, Andy, about positionless basketball.
Yeah.
And that's exactly in the fall of 2009. That's exactly what we went to. We started full court pressing. We started running on offense. We started having 5 players spread the floor and all handle the basketball. And everyone told me, it was like, man, that's really risky. Nobody's winning that way. Nobody's playing that way right now. I'm not sure that's going to work. And so, but the principle, so honest about it, put in the effort, hard worked, stay disciplined to what we could do, how we could win. And so that changed. And so then the rules changed as far as hand checking and things like that. So we had to evolve another time, and we had to change the method of how we played slightly, but we didn't change our principles. And so I think that's the key, is that if your organization or as an investor, you know what you're about. You need to know what you're about. I know exactly what I'm about as a leader: honesty, hard work, and discipline. And so I know about that. But then that allows me, I don't leave those, but that allows me to face challenges confidently. And this is what one thing that I have come with in this book, and that I'd love to share with the audience, is that just get a mindset of there are no losses. They're just these lessons to learn. Everything's a victory, because now I've lost in this investment, but what happened? Let me be honest about it. Let me evaluate what's going on. I'm coaching in middle school ball. You're coaching youth ball. I'm coaching middle school ball. I'd like to announce to the audience I did make the Final Four of the parochial league here in Lexington, Kentucky, with 2 teams, my 5th grader and my 7th grader. So I'm a 2-time Final Four coach here this spring, and we got the championship coming up this weekend. But they're lessons to be learned. And I was teaching the girls yesterday, my 7th graders, when their little scrawny fifth graders are throwing the ball up the goal. And so now they're shooting the ball too hard and they're not using the right technique. And I'm like, hey, girls, instead of thinking about the missed shot, evaluate the miss. Was it too strong? Was it too short? Was it to the right or left? But just evaluate. There's no loss here. Just evaluate what happened. Get that knowledge, and now apply it to the next investment, to the next deal, whatever that may be. But when you have that, when you know what you're about and you're principle based, it allows you to make these adjustments along the way. And to me, if I had stayed exactly how we first had success at Kentucky and I didn't adjust, and it would be just like if I went back and coached now. If I tried to coach how I had success in 2009, the market is totally different now. But I would still lead with honesty, hard work, and discipline, but that allows me to make these adjustments. I think that is the attitude and the advice I would give around sustained success.
It's fantastic. I'd like to touch on one more thing before our time is up. One of the things that I just am so grateful that my boys get to participate in some sport. I really didn't care what it was. I knew they'd be tall like their dad, but I didn't want them to play basketball because dad didn't. Because, no one remembers what happened 20 years ago, and it's really the process that I look back on as so valuable rather than any result we did or didn't get. And one of the things that, particularly for my younger son, that I'm so grateful for is the adversity that these things bring. You're in front of people, officials are just rough, people cheat, parents automatically hate each other because their kids are on opposite teams. It's a mess. And the emotions that go on. Could you talk? There's an idea that says when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. Reacting with body language, like, oh, geez, how did? And when a person can control their temperament, it's a big deal. Now, the reason I'd like you to comment on this, Coach, is one of the great books on investing is by Benjamin Graham, who was Warren Buffett's mentor. It was written in the probably 30s, 40s. It's called The Intelligent Investor. And it's really not a book on investing. It's a book on temperament. Because when you're losing money and you have what we call an expense investment or an expense trade, we don't call them winning and losing. We call them an expense trade. It's a lesson learned. But most people, I will tell you, there's the personal development of educating yourself to know what you're doing. But even bigger is the temperament to deal with the emotions of risk and winning and losing and bad things that happen. Can you speak to maybe some players you had, or as a coach, you can get in the heat of the moment and man, you get so caught up in that trance of a game that's not even real. If you're on Mars, you're like, why do they put the ball in the hoop over and over? They're never satisfied. They keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about dealing with emotion and the temperament of a winner?
Absolutely. I learned a great lesson. I wanted to win so badly, and I was driving us competitively at an incredible rate. I was known for getting more out of a team than what the sum greater than the parts, and it was so intense, and I was so competitive that I began a bad relationship with officiating. This is where I learned a very important emotional lesson about my life that I was totally blind to, and I hope this helps some of it. It goes right along with temperament. And so I got this idea that because I was a younger coach in the league and I was coaching against legends in the league, that I convinced myself that they didn't want me to succeed and they had it against me and they had it in for me. And so I was showing up in an emotional state. I was combative before the ball even went in the air. And so this started to develop over years. And even when we started, we were SEC champions and we were at the championship level for a decade. I still continued to have this combative relationship. I was so blessed with one of my mentors came out of retirement and sat on my bench, and she's a Hall of Fame coach, Lynn Dunn. We were at University of Missouri one night, and I'm just letting this official have it and just stay on this official the whole game, and we get beat. And she says, I need to have a meeting with you. And I write about this in the book. Need to have a meeting with you. She said, you're so angry. Your anger has blinded you. It's not helping anyone. It's certainly not helping our players because they're now concerned about you. They're worried about your emotions. So now their emotional energy is divided. It's not helping that referee. Do you really think that the referee likes you more at the end of the game? And so it just hit me in between the eyes is that I had to look at this my strength of competitive pursuit and competitive excellence and success had been overtaken and had now bled into a poor allocation of emotional resource, and that was improper anger. Anger's good. If we're angry about something, that leads us to trying to be, justice and make a situation right. But when we misallocate it and it leaks out into a destructive emotion, that's what I had to learn. And so this is how I coach that now. The first step is there's volatility in the market, right? There's volatility. Accept the volatility of life. Accept that life is going to come with ups, downs, great highs, difficult lows, challenges all in between. Accept the volatility of life. Now, when I take that posture, and I don't think everything should go right. This drives me crazy in basketball right now. Every time a guy or a gal fouls, I don't care. We were watching last night. My 13-year-old loves basketball so much. All she wants to watch is basketball. It doesn't matter if it's NBA, women's, men's. Will you put a game on, Dad? I just want to learn. I want to learn. Every person just throws up their hands, and they're all upset with the referees. And so what I'm teaching her is that that's a poor allocation of your emotional resources right there. That takes you away from what just happened. You did foul. So instead of evaluating how I can correct that mistake, learn that lesson, I'm over here allocating my anger, allocating my disgust towards something that, and listen, are there terrible calls? They're terrible calls because they're human. And there's such a high volume of calls in a basketball game, it's going to be some terrible calls. They get so many of them right. So my point is that there's zero control you have over that person and that referee. And so deploy your emotional assets very judiciously. Pay attention to how you're doing that because we need you to focus. And like Zach did last night, we need you to step in there and make that three-pointer. We don't need you over here depleted because you are emotionally out of touch with the situation. And so I think it's so important for us as leaders to prepare early in the day. And so I talk about being prepared in your spirit, in your emotions, in your physical life, in your professional competencies, and in your fun. These 5 areas, pay attention to these and prepare in these areas. And this practice, Andy, early in the day, I like to try to go through this, and we talk about it in the book, accept that volatility of life. I know today I have a plan for today. I'm prepared for the day, but I'm also prepared for if things don't go exactly the way they need to go. I'm now emotionally prepared to handle that, and that takes preparation, and I think that's a real valuable lesson for all of us as leaders who want to perform at our best to learn.
We've been speaking with Coach Matthew Mitchell, the all-time winningest coach in the women's program at the University of Kentucky. And we started our conversation with preparation. We're going to close the conversation with it. And I'm going to speak to everyone within the sound of my voice in some of the most serious language I can summon. What'll happen in the state championship tonight, I don't know. We'll live with the result because we did the work. We're not going to worry about, you're shooting 45% from three on the season. That's what you're going to, you throw the thing up. It's got a 45% going in tonight.
Wow.
What may go in, may not.
Wow.
But the big thing is, in life, it's a little different than basketball. And there's some volatility that I think our country and our world is going to face from where I sit. There's a bigger game to play. We have so much debt in our country. We have so many obligations in our country. We have tremendous amounts of leverage and debt and derivatives in our country. And if you read any government report by the Government Accountability Office, the Congressional Budget Office, or the Office of the Treasury, all three use this term unsustainable. That the path that the both parties, this is a bipartisan problem. The path of debt, the path of borrowing, the path of easy money, the path of consumerism is unsustainable. And there will be some volatility, whether it's this year, next year, 5 years, I don't know when it is, but we're going to go through some tough times. Some of you guys remember your grandparents, maybe, if you're old enough like me, they went through some tough times in the 1930s. And we're kind of set up, that could be a possibility for us. And I will just tell you right now that in order to address that, you will either be prepared or you will not be prepared. And the way to prepare is not necessarily worried about, Bitcoin or a stock or Nvidia's price. The way to prepare, everyone, is through learning generalized principles of leadership, generalized principles of honesty with yourself, hard work, discipline, the things we've been speaking about. Now, I always, my audience knows how I sell books, and I've been told 1,000 times to say, Andy, don't turn your podcast into an infomercial. I won't. I absolutely do this unapologetically. I wouldn't have Coach on here and ask him to put in his time if I didn't feel it was a tremendous benefit to everybody listening. So listen very carefully. If you had the chance to sit down with a winner in one of the most competitive conferences ever, and he's won more games than any other coach in his program, that's a winner. If you had the chance to go to dinner with him and pick his brain for an hour, would you pick up the tab for a steak? Because if you would, that's going to be far more money than you would ever spend on going to Amazon.com right now and picking up your copy that's waiting for you of Ready to Win. How great leaders, they find success through preparation. And I guarantee you, as a guy who's written a couple of books myself, when a man puts his heart and soul into a book, you're going to get much more of what he has than you'd ever get from a steak dinner. So for less money and more benefit, you can learn the generalized principles from a proven winner, so you can prepare for some real volatility that's going to come down the pike. I'll leave you the last word, Coach, and then if you would, hang on after I close the show so I can properly thank you. But I'll give you the last word. To anyone who's thinking about, you think about trying out for the team or not, maybe some people are hesitant. They're working at a job and they think, could I really be an entrepreneur or could I really be an investor? Give us a little pep talk and get these guys going and take a little chance on themselves.
Yeah, I would just want people to think about where their performance stands right now. And what I just believe is that there is a lot of underperformance. There's a lot of people out there who don't believe in themselves at the level they need to, because I just believe there's so much more out there for us. But the key to it is getting into principle-based thinking, believing in yourself, and then doing the work that it takes to really grow. And when you do that, you're going to start soaring as a leader. And that's what I have found over the 25 years I coached in athletics. That's what I've found that is I can teach people how to do that. And after many, many hours of learning that, and it comes down to these principles. And so you can follow us at CoachMatthewMitchell.com and find out what's going on there. And we're on socials at Coach Matthew Mitchell. And then each week, Andy, I try to teach and help people just like you are on the Coach Matthew Mitchell Show podcast. And so if I can ever be of service to people, that's how they can get in touch with me. And I believe there's more out there for you. I believe that it's time for you to step into your potential and be the performer and the player and the producer that you can truly be. So, so grateful to have the time to have this conversation. It's been awesome.
Coach Mitchell, if you'll hang on just a bit after I close the show so I can properly thank you and make sure all our technology uploads. We've been speaking with Coach Matthew Mitchell, the author of Ready to Win, How Great Leaders Succeed Through Preparation. His website is CoachMatthewMitchell.com. You can follow him there. I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Mostly, I hope you really think about principle-based thinking, how to change your investing and therefore change your life. We'll see you next time, everyone.